Welcome to your deep dive
Yeah.
into the world of startups. We're going to be exploring excerpts from Eric Ries's The Lean Startup. It's a book I know you're interested in. And you're looking to learn more about how to increase success rates and give you tools to deal with all that uncertainty when you launch something new.
A lot of uncertainty.
Right. What's really intriguing about Ries's approach is it kind of goes against what we often think we know.
Uh-huh.
It's not about going big from the start, but about small batches and quick experiments and constant learning.
Yeah, Ries flips the script on that bigger is better mentality.
Yeah.
So it's a refreshing take, especially for those who maybe feel overwhelmed by the pressure to have everything perfect from day one.
Definitely. So before we get into the methods themselves, let's just clarify what Ries actually means by startup. He uses a very specific definition, right?
He does. He defines a startup as a human institution designed to create new products and services under conditions of extreme uncertainty. So that's really a crucial distinction because it means startups aren't just limited to, tech companies or those chasing venture capital millions.
Right.
This definition applies to anyone anywhere who's trying to build something new when the answers aren't clear-cut.
I think that extreme uncertainty part is something that a lot of people can relate to. It's that feeling of stepping into the unknown, not having a roadmap, which can be both exhilarating and terrifying for anyone starting a new project or a business.
Absolutely.
Even if it's not a business in the traditional sense. Does that resonate with you at all?
Absolutely. And that's precisely where the lean startup method comes in.
Okay.
It provides a framework to navigate that uncertainty, and it's built on 5 core principles.
Yep.
Entrepreneurs are everywhere. Entrepreneurship is management. Validated learning, build, measure, learn, and innovation accounting.
I love that validated learning.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to turn the traditional product development cycle on its head.
Yeah.
It's not just build it and pray. It's about constantly testing your assumptions in the real world.
Absolutely. And testing those assumptions not in a vacuum, but with real customer interactions.
Did you find this emphasis on real-world testing to be a key theme throughout the book?
Absolutely. It dismantles the myth of the lone genius entrepreneur,
Right.
the Steve Jobs archetype we so often see. He argues that startup success isn't about having some innate talent or just being in the right place at the right time. It's about a process, a way of thinking and operating that anyone can learn and apply.
That's incredibly empowering.
It is.
Because it means that success isn't some mysterious force reserved for a select few.
Right.
If you have the right approach, it's attainable.
Absolutely.
But one question that pops into my mind is, does this only apply to those small, scrappy startups? Could a large established company like, say, Intuit, really embrace this kind of thinking?
Now that's where things get really interesting. Ries actually offers a compelling case study of Intuit, the company behind TurboTax and QuickBooks. It seems counterintuitive that a Fortune 1000 company could operate with the agility of a startup, but they actually integrated lean startup principles quite successfully.
Wait, hold on. Intuit, a financial software giant operating like a nimble startup. How did they pull that off?
They did it by creating an environment where internal teams could function like mini startups, embracing the same principles of experimentation and validated learning.
Interesting.
One great example is the development of SnapTax, their mobile app for filing taxes, instead of relying on, traditional market research and rigid development cycles. They empowered small teams to experiment and iterate, quickly gathering real user feedback every step of the way.
So they essentially carved out these little startup ecosystems within their massive corporate structure.
Precisely.
It challenges the assumption that large companies can't innovate, doesn't it?
They proved that even established companies with significant resources can still foster that startup spirit and agility. It's about creating a culture where experimentation is encouraged and learning from real-world feedback is valued.
That's a fantastic segue into our next topic. Minimum viable products, or MVPs as they're often called.
Yes.
This is a concept that's often misunderstood.
Very much so.
What does Ries have to say about building MVPs, and how do they fit into the larger lean startup method?
He uses the story of IMVU, the online avatar-based social platform, to illustrate the MVP concept. They initially struggled, starting as a simple instant messaging add-on before pivoting to a standalone platform. What's crucial here is that the MVP isn't about building a perfect, fully featured product right out of the gate.
Right.
It's about quickly creating the bare minimum,
Okay.
just enough to test your core assumptions.
So it's not about launching with a perfect product, but
Right.
learning as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Exactly. And the beauty of the MVP is that it forces you to focus on what truly matters to your customers.
Right.
A great example of this is Zappos.
Uh-huh.
They started with a ridiculously simple website,
Okay.
nothing like the sleek online retail experience we're used to today,
Right.
just to test one fundamental assumption. Will people actually buy shoes online?
And that seemingly rudimentary website turned into a billion-dollar business.
It did.
It's a stark reminder that sometimes simplicity and speed trump perfection.
Precisely. The MVP is all about validating those leap of faith assumptions.
Okay.
These are the untested beliefs that underpin your entire business plan.
Right.
You might think you know what customers want, but the MVP is designed to test those assumptions in the real world.
Sometimes we get so caught up in our grand visions that we forget to question the underlying assumptions. And as we've seen with Zappos, even seemingly crazy assumptions like people buying shoes online can turn out to be spot on. Did Ree highlight any other examples of companies successfully using MVPs to test those leap of faith assumptions?
He did. One fascinating example is Facebook.
Okay.
How did they manage to raise millions of dollars in funding when user engagement was still relatively low?
Right.
They were testing a massive leap of faith
Okay.
that user behavior would evolve in a specific way. Their bet wasn't on current metrics, but on a future they believed they could create.
So they were betting on potential, not just what was immediately measurable.
Right. It's like planting a seed and having faith that will grow into a mighty tree.
Right.
But you have to nurture it, adjust based on what you observe, and be willing to shift course if the environment demands it.
So what made investors believe in that potential?
In Facebook's case, it was likely a combination of factors. The team's vision, their understanding of the emerging social media landscape, and their ability to articulate that potential to investors.
Okay.
But it underscores a crucial point. Sometimes the most successful startups are the ones willing to bet on those big, audacious assumptions.
That brings us to another crucial concept, pivoting. It seemed to go hand in hand with testing assumptions. What are Ries's thoughts on pivoting, and why is it so essential to the lean startup methodology?
Pivoting is about acknowledging when something isn't working and having the courage to change direction based on what you've learned.
Okay.
It's not about giving up, but about adapting and finding a better path forward.
Right.
Think of it as course correction.
Uh,
You're still aiming for your destination, but you're adjusting your route based on real-time feedback.
It's fascinating how we often view pivoting as failure
Yeah,
when it's actually a vital part of the process.
exactly. It's about embracing validated learning and using it to make better decisions.
Right.
A great example is Votizen,
Yeah.
a political startup.
Okay.
They started by building a platform for voter engagement,
Great.
connecting voters and encouraging political participation.
Okay.
But their growth wasn't sustainable.
So their initial model wasn't resonating with their target audience?
Right.
What did they do?
They pivoted, they shifted to a more transactional model, using their technology to connect voters directly with political campaigns.
Okay.
They essentially became a conduit for targeted political communication,
Interest?
leveraging their technology in a different way.
So they kept their core vision of empowering voters, but adapted their approach based on what they were learning in the market.
Precisely. Pivoting is not abandoning your vision.
Right.
It's about refining it and finding the most effective path to achieving it.
Okay.
Another great example is Wealthfront,
Huh.
the online financial advisor.
Right.
They started by targeting amateur investors
Okay.
with a platform that was almost gamified, but it didn't quite click.
So they had a product market mismatch.
Yeah.
A common challenge for startups.
Right.
Did they just scrap the whole idea and start over?
No, they pivoted.
Okay.
They realized their technology platform designed to analyze and optimize investments could be valuable for professional money managers.
Okay.
They rebranded, targeted a new market, and even tweaked some features,
Uh-huh.
but they kept the core of their technology and vision intact.
So this shows that pivoting is about maximizing the value of your work,
Absolutely.
even when you have to change course. It's about being flexible and adaptable, a core tenet of the lean startup approach.
And this adaptability extends beyond just your product or service.
Right.
It's about building an entire organization that's designed to learn and evolve.
Okay.
Ries calls this the adaptive organization.
An adaptive organization.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that. What are the hallmarks of an adaptive organization?
Think of it as a company that's built to learn and adapt, much like a living organism.
Okay.
They are constantly iterating, experimenting, and refining their processes based on feedback from the market.
Right.
A great example of this is IMVU's approach to employee training.
Okay.
They didn't create a static training program.
Right.
They built a system that evolved based on feedback and the company's changing needs.
So they treated their training program almost like a product,
Yes,
constantly iterating and improving it based on real-world data.
precisely.
That's pretty innovative.
It is. They understood that even internal processes should be subject to the same principles of experimentation and validated learning that apply to product development.
That makes sense.
And this approach is reflected throughout an adaptive organization.
Right.
It's about building a culture that embraces change and continuous improvement.
Yeah.
And that's reflected in every aspect of the business, from product development to employee training.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive already.
We have.
We talked about, defining a startup,
Yes.
the lean startup method, MVPs,
Right.
leap of faith assumptions,
Yeah.
the importance of pivoting
Yeah.
and building an adaptive organization.
Absolutely.
But now that we have a better understanding of these principles, let's talk about how they translate into action.
Right.
Where do we go from here? How do we actually start putting these ideas into practice?
Well, once you've identified those leap of faith assumptions and
Yep.
built your first MVP,
Right.
you enter what Ries calls the build, measure, learn feedback loop. This loop is the heart of the lean startup approach.
The build, measure, learn feedback loop sounds like the engine that drives the entire process.
It is the engine.
So let's unpack that in more detail. Can you explain how this loop works and why it's so important?
It's about constantly iterating, experimenting, and refining your product or service based on real-world data.
Okay.
It starts with building something,
Right.
ideally your MVP.
Okay.
Then you measure its performance
Right.
by gathering data about how customers use it and what their feedback is.
Okay.
And finally, you learn from that data,
Right.
analyzing what worked, what didn't, and using those insights to inform your next iteration.
So the cyclical process of building, measuring, learning, and then building, again, incorporating those learnings each time.
Exactly.
Speed seems to be a crucial element here.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's about quick experiments,
Right.
not long, drawn-out product development cycles.
Uh-huh.
The faster you can run through these cycles,
Yeah.
the more you learn and the faster you can adapt. Think about Groupon's early days.
Okay.
Their very first deal was a simple offer for 2-for-1 pizza at a local restaurant.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't a grand marketing campaign,
Right.
just a quick experiment to test their core assumptions.
Right.
And look at the massive growth that simple experiments spawned.
It's a great example of how even small, seemingly insignificant experiments can yield incredible results.
Exactly.
But with all this talk of measuring and iterating, how do you actually track your progress within this feedback loop? How do you know if you're on the right track and not just spinning your wheels?
That's where innovation accounting comes in.
Ooh.
It's a way of measuring progress that's specific to startups.
Okay.
Traditional accounting metrics like profit and loss
Right.
don't always apply in these uncertain, rapidly changing environments.
So innovation accounting provides metrics that are more relevant to startups and their unique challenges.
Exactly. It's about tracking metrics that reveal true customer engagement and behavior,
Okay.
not just vanity metrics like total downloads or website traffic.
Yeah.
It's about understanding how your product is really performing and using that data to guide your decision-making.
This has been an incredible deep dive so far.
It has.
We've covered a lot of ground.
A lot.
We defined a startup,
Yes.
explored the core principles of the lean startup method,
Uh-huh.
delved into the importance of MVPs,
Right.
and discussed the power of pivoting and the build, measure, learn feedback loop.
Right.
But I'm eager to learn more about this concept of innovation accounting. How does it work in practice? Can you give us some concrete examples of the types of metrics startups should be tracking?
Absolutely. So one example would be activation rate.
Okay.
This measures how many users actually complete a key action that demonstrates they're getting value from your product.
Okay.
For example, if you're building a music streaming app,
Uh-huh.
your activation rate might be the percentage of users who create a playlist within the first week of signing up.
Gotcha.
Another key metric is customer churn rate. This tells you how many customers are leaving or canceling their subscription over a given period of time.
Right.
It's a critical measure of customer satisfaction and retention.
Okay.
And then there's the Net Promoter Score, or NPS.
Uh-huh.
This is a simple survey that asks customers how likely they are to recommend your product or service to others.
Right.
It's a good indicator of overall customer loyalty and brand advocacy.
Interesting. So those are just a few examples. The key is to choose metrics that are relevant to your specific business goals
Exactly.
and that provide actionable insights.
Absolutely.
And that's where the art of innovation accounting comes in.
Yeah.
It's not just about tracking data.
Right.
It's about understanding what that data means
Absolutely.
and using it to make informed decisions about your product, your business, and your future.
Precisely.
It sounds like innovation accounting is a crucial skill for any entrepreneur or innovator.
It is.
But we're running out of time for this part of our deep dive. We'll pick up this thread in our next session and delve even deeper into the world of innovation accounting and how it can help you navigate the uncertainty of startup life.
Sounds good. One of the things that really struck me about Ries's book is how much he emphasizes understanding customer needs and behaviors. Even when those needs are unexpected or contradict your initial assumptions.
Yeah.
He seems to argue that customer feedback isn't just important, it's everything.
It is. It's that constant reminder that we don't operate in a vacuum.
Right.
We need to be out there talking to customers, observing how they interact with our product,
Yeah.
really understanding their needs and pain points.
Absolutely.
I love that story about IMVU, the online avatar platform,
Yes.
where their initial assumption about users wanting to interact primarily with existing friends turned out to be completely off base.
It's a classic case of getting stuck in our own heads.
Yeah.
We think we know what customers want,
Right.
but the reality is often quite different.
Right.
And that's where the importance of testing those leap of faith assumptions comes in.
Right.
Ries uses a brilliant analogy to illustrate this point. Imagine pitching a business plan that hinges on faster than light travel.
Okay. That's a pretty wild leap of faith.
Right.
But I see your point.
Mm-hmm.
Even seemingly sound business plans can be built on shaky assumptions.
Absolutely.
Things we take for granted but haven't actually validated.
Exactly. And the lean startup method forces you to confront those assumptions head on.
Right.
It's not enough to just say, I think people will love this.
Right.
You need to find ways to test those assumptions in the real world, gather evidence, and be willing to adapt based on what you learn.
So how do you actually go about testing those leap of faith assumptions? It sounds like a daunting task.
It can be.
Especially for early stage startups with limited resources.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Ries offers some very practical advice. He emphasizes the importance of what he calls getting out of the building, talking to potential customers, observing their behavior, and gathering real-world data.
He's a big proponent of that direct customer interaction. It's not just about market research reports or online surveys.
No.
It's about having those real conversations and really understanding the nuances of customer needs and motivations.
He highlights a fascinating principle from Toyota's legendary production system called Agenchi Genbutsu, which means go and see for yourself. It's the idea that you can't truly understand a problem unless you experience it firsthand.
That's such a powerful concept.
It is.
It reminds me of that story about the chief engineer for Toyota's Sienna minivan.
Yes.
He went on this massive road trip across North America, driving over 53,000 miles and talking to countless customers.
Wow.
He wanted to understand their needs, not just from reports or data, but by experiencing those needs firsthand.
Exactly. And that commitment to getting out of the building to understanding the customer experience in a deeply personal way is what sets apart successful lean startups.
But there's a balance.
Price.
We could spend all our time researching and talking to customers, but at some point we have to start building. How do we know when it's time to stop researching and start building?
That's the million-dollar question. I feel like there's always a danger of getting stuck in analysis paralysis, overthinking every detail and never actually getting anything out the door.
It's a valid concern. And that's where the concept of the minimum viable product, or MVP, comes in. The MVP is about finding the fastest, most efficient way to test your most critical assumptions.
Absolutely.
So it's about getting something out there quickly, even if it's not perfect, to start gathering feedback and validating those key assumptions.
Exactly. It's about learning, not perfection. Remember the Zappos example? Their first website was incredibly basic, almost rudimentary by today's standards, but it served its purpose to test whether people would actually buy shoes online.
And that simple website proved the concept, opening the door to a multi-billion-dollar business. It challenges the notion that you need a flawless, feature-rich product to succeed.
Absolutely. Ries shares another great story.
Okay.
This time about Dropbox, the file sharing service.
Uh-huh.
They knew they had a great product,
Okay.
but they also knew that file synchronization wasn't a problem most people were actively thinking about.
Right.
So they needed a way to communicate the value of their product in a simple, compelling way.
So how did they do it? Did they launch a big marketing campaign?
Nope. They took a much more lean startup approach.
Okay.
They created a simple but brilliant demo video that showcased the magic of Dropbox.
Okay.
It showed people in a very tangible way how easy and effortless file synchronization could be.
Right.
And that video went viral.
Oh, wow.
Sparking massive user adoption and propelling Dropbox to success.
It wasn't about flashy features or marketing hype, but about demonstrating the core value proposition
Exactly.
in a way that resonated with users.
Exactly. It's about finding those creative ways to test your assumptions and communicate your value proposition.
Okay.
And sometimes that means intentionally launching with a low-quality MVP.
Wait, really? That seems counterintuitive.
It might seem counterintuitive.
Don't we always want to put our best foot forward, especially in those early stages?
It can be tempting, but there's a logic to it.
Okay.
Ries shares a story about IMVU's early days. They intentionally launched their avatar platform with stationary avatars, even though they knew users would want to move them around.
So they intentionally limited the functionality of their product. Why would they do that?
They couldn't afford to build the technology for walking avatars at that stage.
Okay.
But instead of delaying their launch, they decided to test their core assumption that people would want to interact with each other using avatars, even with this limited functionality.
It was a brilliant way to test their core assumption without investing in unnecessary features or technology.
Exactly.
Did it pay off?
It did. User feedback was clear.
Okay.
They loved the avatar concept, but they wanted the ability to move them around.
Right.
So IMVU implemented a simple teleport feature that allowed avatars to jump from one spot to another.
Right.
It wasn't the smoothest or most visually appealing solution, but it allowed them to test and validate that key feature without overspending.
It's a great example of how an MVP can be used not just to test assumptions, but also to prioritize feature development and allocate resources effectively.
Absolutely.
It's about being resourceful, creative, and focusing on what truly matters to your customers.
And once you've built your MVP, tested those assumptions, and gathered that precious customer feedback, you need a way to measure your progress and make sense of all that data. That's where innovation accounting comes in.
Yes, innovation accounting.
Yes.
We touched on this in our previous part, and I'm really interested in exploring it further.
Okay.
It's about using metrics that are specifically relevant to startups,
Exactly. Traditional accounting focuses on profitability and efficiency. But in the world of startups, those metrics don't always tell the whole story. Innovation accounting is about using data to track your learning and make better decisions in a context of high uncertainty.
It's about recognizing that the goal in the early stages of a startup isn't necessarily to maximize profit, but to maximize learning.
Exactly. And that learning is driven by tracking the right metrics. Innovation accounting involves setting clear learning milestones, tracking actionable metrics, and using those insights to drive continuous improvement.
Okay, I'm starting to get the big picture. But can you give us some concrete examples of what these learning milestones and actionable metrics might look like? I'm sure our listeners are eager to understand how to actually implement innovation accounting.
Absolutely. Let's say you're building a mobile app. And your core hypothesis is that users will love it so much they'll invite their friends to join. A learning milestone might be achieving a certain viral coefficient.
For those who aren't familiar, the viral coefficient measures how many new users each existing user brings in.
Exactly.
It's a key metric for understanding the organic growth potential of a product or service.
Absolutely. So you track that metric closely to see if you're on track to achieve your viral growth goals. If your viral coefficient is low, it might indicate that you need to revisit your product features or marketing strategy.
Interesting.
Another example might be tracking customer lifetime value, CLTV.
CLTV is a really interesting metric because it looks beyond just the initial transaction. And considers the total value a customer brings to your business over their entire relationship with you.
Precisely. In the early stages of a startup, you might be focused on acquiring as many customers as possible.
Right.
But as you mature,
Right.
you need to shift your focus to acquiring high-value customers who will stick around and generate revenue over the long term.
So innovation accounting is about choosing the right metrics to track, not just any metrics. It's about aligning those metrics with your business goals and using them to make strategic decisions.
It's about using data to validate your assumptions and guide your progress. It's about having a roadmap for navigating the uncertainty of startup life.
So it's not just about numbers.
No.
It's about what those numbers tell you about your customers and your business.
Absolutely.
It's about using data to tell a story. A
Yes.
story about your growth,
Yeah.
your challenges, and your ultimate success.
Exactly.
It sounds like innovation accounting is more than just a set of metrics.
It is.
It's a way of thinking,
Uh-huh.
a framework for approaching decision-making in a more data-driven and customer-centric way.
You're absolutely right. And that data-driven approach is essential not just for making decisions about your product or service,
Right.
but also for making decisions about your business model, your marketing strategy, and even your team.
This is also insightful. I feel like we're really starting to unpack the core principles of the lean startup methodology
Yeah,
and how they can be applied in a practical, actionable way.
absolutely.
But before we move on, I want to circle back to a concept we've touched on a few times now,
Okay.
pivoting. It seems to be such a crucial element of the lean startup,
It is.
and I'm eager to dive a bit deeper.
Okay.
Can you give us a concrete example of what a pivot might look like in practice?
Let's revisit voters in the political startup.
Gotcha.
Their initial vision was to build a platform for voter engagement,
Right.
connecting voters and facilitating online discussions,
Mm-hmm.
but through their experiments and customer interactions, they realized their model wasn't gaining the traction they'd hoped for.
So their initial model wasn't resonating with the market in the way they'd anticipated.
Right, their growth wasn't sustainable, so they pivoted.
Okay.
They shifted their focus to a more transactional model,
Okay.
leveraging their technology to connect voters directly with political campaigns.
Okay.
Essentially, they became a platform for targeted political communication.
Interesting.
They kept their core vision of empowering voters,
Right.
but adapted their approach based on what they were learning.
So they kept their core vision of empowering voters, but adapted their approach based on what they were learning in the market.
Precisely. Another great example is Wealthfront,
Mm-hmm.
the online financial advisor.
Right.
They initially targeted amateur investors
Okay.
with a gamified platform.
Huh?
It was innovative, but it didn't quite click with their intended audience.
It sounds like they had a classic case of product-market mismatch, a common pitfall for startups. Did they give up on the whole idea?
No, they did a major pivot.
Okay.
Realizing their technology designed to analyze and optimize investments could be a powerful tool for professional money managers.
Right.
They rebranded, targeted a new market, and even tweaked some features.
Okay.
But the core of their technology and their vision remained intact.
It's a great example of how a pivot can be about repurposing what you've already built to find the more viable market or application.
Exactly. It's about maximizing the value of your work even when you have to change course. But pivoting isn't always easy.
Right.
It requires a willingness to let go of your initial assumptions
Yeah.
and embrace the uncertainty of the unknown.
It takes courage to admit that something isn't working
It does.
and to be willing to shift gears.
Absolutely.
But as these examples show, that willingness to adapt can be the key to unlocking massive success.
Absolutely. And it highlights a key theme throughout the lean startup,
Okay.
the need to be constantly learning and adapting.
Right.
It's not just about building a product or launching a business. It's about building an organization that's designed to evolve, to respond to change, and to constantly improve.
That's such a powerful insight.
It is.
It's about embracing the journey and
Yeah.
being open to learning and adapting along the way.
Absolutely.
And it's about building a team that's not afraid to experiment, to fail, and to learn from those experiences.
You're absolutely right. And that brings us to another important aspect of the lean startup.
Okay.
Understanding the different ways startups can achieve sustainable growth. Ries refers to these as engines of growth.
Engines of growth.
And
Tell me more about that. It sounds like we're moving beyond just building a product
We are.
and into the realm of scaling a business.
Exactly. Once you've achieved product market fit,
Right?
the focus shifts to driving sustainable growth.
Okay.
Ries identifies 4 primary engines:
Okay.
word of mouth, side effects of product usage,
Okay.
funded advertising,
Okay.
and repeat purchase or use.
Okay. Let's break those down. Word of mouth is pretty straightforward. Happy
So
customers telling their friends about your product.
exactly.
Side effects of product usage. Is that like when someone sees you using a cool new gadget and asks
Yes,
about it?
precisely. Think about fashion trends, social media platforms,
Right.
or even something like PayPal.
Okay.
The act of using the product inherently exposes others to it,
So the product itself becomes a marketing tool?
right?
What about funded advertising?
Uh-huh.
That's the more traditional approach to customer acquisition, right?
Right. But it's not just about spending money on ads.
Okay.
The key here is ensuring that the cost of acquiring a new customer is less than the revenue they generate over their lifetime.
Makes sense.
Otherwise, it's not sustainable.
Right. You need to make sure you're making more money than you're spending on acquiring new customers.
Yeah.
What about repeat purchase or use?
Yes,
That seems like the holy grail for many businesses,
it
a
is.
recurring revenue stream.
Absolutely. Think about subscription services like Netflix or Spotify,
Right.
or even everyday products like groceries.
Uh-huh.
The goal is to create products or services that people naturally want to use again and again.
So it's about building loyalty and creating a customer base
Yeah.
that's not just making one-time purchases,
Right.
but that's coming back for more.
Exactly.
This concept of engines of growth is really fascinating. How do you know which engine is right for your business?
That's a great question, and there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Right.
It depends on your product,
Uh-huh.
your target market, your business model, and even your stage of growth.
Right.
Some businesses are naturally suited for viral growth,
Uh-huh.
while others might be better off focusing on customer retention or paid acquisition.
So it's about understanding the characteristics of each engine
Yes.
and choosing the one that aligns best with your overall strategy.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that your engine mix might change over time as your business evolves.
Okay.
You might start with a heavy focus on word-of-mouth marketing in the early stages,
Right.
but as you grow, you might shift to a more balanced approach.
Okay.
That includes paid advertising and customer retention strategies.
It's about being adaptable and adjusting your approach as you learn more about your market and your customers.
Precisely.
Hmm.
And it's about recognizing that sustainable growth is not just about acquiring new customers.
Right.
It's about retaining those customers and building long-term relationships.
This has been such an insightful deep dive into the world of startups and the lean startup methodology.
It has.
We've covered so much ground from defining a startup and understanding MVPs to exploring the power of pivoting and identifying the different engines of growth.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how do you actually put all of this into practice?
Okay.
How do you build a company that can adapt, innovate, and thrive in the face of uncertainty?
That's where the concept of an adaptive organization comes in.
Right.
It's about building a company that's designed to learn and evolve, constantly adapting its processes and structure based on feedback from the market.
So it's not just about having a great product or a clever marketing strategy,
No.
but about building a company culture that embraces change and continuous improvement.
Exactly.
Hmm.
A great example of this is IMVU's approach to employee training.
Okay.
They didn't just create a static training program,
Right.
but built a system that evolved organically based on feedback and the needs of the company.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So they treated their training program like a product,
Yes,
constantly iterating and improving it based on real-world data.
precisely.
That's pretty innovative. Oh.
It is. They understood that even internal processes should be subject to the same principles of experimentation and validated learning that apply to product development.
Right. This is incredibly insightful.
Mhm.
It makes you realize that the lean startup principles can be applied to so much more than just launching new products.
Absolutely.
It's about creating a culture of continuous improvement throughout your entire organization.
Exactly.
But how do you actually go about creating this kind of adaptive organization? Is there a blueprint or a set of steps to follow?
While there's no one-size-fits-all blueprint,
Right.
there are some core principles that can guide you.
Okay.
It starts with leadership.
Okay.
Leaders need to set the tone by embracing the principles of the lean startup
Right.
and actively encouraging experimentation and learning.
So it's about creating a culture where people feel safe to try new things,
Yes.
to fail, and to learn from those experiences.
Absolutely. And it's about building a team that's adaptable, resilient, and passionate about learning.
Okay.
It's about creating systems and processes that support innovation, such as dedicated innovation teams, clear metrics for measuring progress,
Right.
and a process for incorporating feedback and learning.
This is all so inspiring. It makes you realize that building a successful startup is about so much more than just having a great idea.
It really is.
It's about having the right mindset, the
Absolutely.
right processes, and the right culture.
It's about building a company that's designed to learn and adapt,
Right.
constantly evolving to meet the challenges and opportunities of the market.
This has been an incredible deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I've learned so much about the lean startup methodology
Good.
and how it can be applied to build successful, sustainable businesses.
Excellent.
But I'm curious, is there anything else that Ries highlights as being crucial for building a thriving startup? Are there any specific tools or techniques that you think are particularly valuable?
One technique that stands out is the 5 whys method,
Okay.
which is a simple but powerful tool for problem solving.
The 5 whys. We've mentioned this a few times, but we haven't really delved into it. Can you tell us more about how it works and why it's so effective?
It's a technique borrowed from Toyota's production system,
Okay.
and it's all about getting to the root cause of a problem,
Right.
not just addressing the symptoms.
Right.
Essentially, you repeatedly ask why,
Okay.
ideally 5 times, to drill down to the underlying cause of a problem.
Okay. I can see how that could be helpful in identifying the true source of an issue. Can you give us a real-world example?
Imagine a software company is experiencing frequent server outages.
Okay.
They could keep fixing the immediate problem, replacing a faulty server, for example. But by asking why 5 times,
Okay.
they might discover the root cause is actually a lack of proper training for their engineers,
Okay.
leading to configuration errors.
So instead of just putting out fires,
Right.
they're addressing the underlying systemic issues
Exactly.
that are causing those fires in the first place.
Yeah,
That seems much more effective.
it is. It's about being proactive rather than reactive.
Right. The 5 whys method can be applied to any problem, big or small.
Okay.
It's about shifting from a blame-oriented culture
Right.
to a learning-oriented culture.
Right. It's about encouraging people to ask questions, to dig deeper, and to find solutions that address the root cause of a problem rather than just the symptoms.
Exactly. And it's a great way to foster collaboration and shared understanding across different teams.
Yeah.
When everyone is involved in the problem-solving process, you're more likely to find effective and sustainable solutions.
This is such a powerful tool. I can see how it would be invaluable in building a more resilient and adaptable organization.
Absolutely.
It's about creating a culture where everyone feels empowered to identify problems,
Yes.
ask questions, and contribute to solutions.
Absolutely. It's about building a culture of continuous improvement,
Right.
where everyone is constantly looking for ways to learn to grow and to make things better.
And that's a perfect segue into our next topic.
Okay.
The importance of building an innovation sandbox within your organization. The innovation sandbox. It's such a powerful concept.
It is.
Essentially, it's about creating a protected space within a larger organization
Okay.
where internal teams can operate like startups
Okay.
with the autonomy and resources to experiment and learn
Right.
without putting the core business at risk.
It's about creating a safe space for experimentation and innovation,
Yes.
where people can try new things, fail fast, and learn from those failures.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that innovation often happens at the edges of an organization,
Right.
where people are free to challenge the status quo and explore new ideas without fear of repercussions.
It sounds like a way to recapture that startup spirit and agility
It is.
that can often get lost as companies grow larger and more bureaucratic.
Absolutely.
But how do you actually set up an innovation sandbox effectively? What are the key elements to consider?
There are a few crucial components to building an effective innovation sandbox.
Okay.
First, it needs a clear and compelling mission. The team needs to understand what problem they're trying to solve and what success looks like.
Right.
This helps to focus their efforts
Right.
and ensure that their work is aligned with the company's overall strategy.
So it's not just about giving people free rein to experiment,
No.
but about giving them a clear direction and a specific goal to work toward. What else is essential?
It's crucial to dedicate a budget and resources to the innovation sandbox.
Makes sense.
This allows the team to operate independently and make decisions quickly
Right.
without being bogged down by the usual corporate approval processes.
It makes sense to give them the freedom and flexibility to act like a startup, even within the context of a larger organization. Anything else?
Absolutely. You need a clear process for measuring progress and making decisions.
Right.
This is where innovation accounting
Yeah.
and the build, measure, learn feedback loop come into play.
Right.
The team needs to be able to track their progress, validate their assumptions, and pivot when necessary.
So the innovation sandbox needs to be a learning environment. It's not
Yes.
just a playground for pet projects.
Exactly. The goal is to foster a culture of experimentation and innovation
Right.
that is grounded in data-driven decision-making
Uh-huh.
and a commitment to continuous learning.
But even with the best intentions and processes in place, innovation can still be a challenge within a large organization.
It can be.
There are often internal politics, resistance to change, and a fear of failure that can stifle creativity and innovation.
Absolutely. It requires a conscious effort to shift the mindset
Right.
and create a culture that embraces experimentation.
Right.
Companies need to celebrate failure as a learning opportunity, encourage risk-taking, and empower employees to challenge the status quo.
It sounds like building a truly innovative organization requires not just tools and processes,
Hmm?
but also a fundamental shift in culture.
It does. It starts with leadership.
Okay.
Leaders need to set the tone
Right.
by embracing the principles of the lean startup and actively encouraging experimentation and learning. They need to create systems and processes that support innovation and reward those who are willing to take risks and push boundaries.
But it's not just about top-down directives, is it? It's
Mhm.
about creating a culture where everyone feels empowered to contribute,
You're exactly right.
to share ideas, and to challenge assumptions.
It's about fostering open communication,
Yeah.
collaboration, and a willingness to experiment and learn. It's about creating a culture where people feel safe to fail
Right.
and where those failures are seen as opportunities for growth.
This has been such a rich and thought-provoking deep dive.
It
I
has.
feel like I have a whole new perspective on not just building startups,
Good.
but on building successful organizations in general.
It's about so much more than just having a great product
Oh, yeah.
or a clever marketing strategy.
It really is. It's about having the right mindset, the right processes, and the right culture. It's about building an organization that's designed to learn and adapt, constantly evolving to meet the challenges and opportunities of the market.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation,
It has.
and I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear more about how to put these principles into practice.
But before we move on to our final part,
Oh.
I want to ask you one question.
Mm-hmm.
What's one specific piece of advice you would give to our listeners who are interested in applying the lean startup principles to their own work or projects?
Start with a hypothesis.
Okay.
What is the one key assumption that, if proven false, would invalidate your entire idea?
Okay.
Then find the fastest, cheapest way to test that assumption.
Right.
Build a minimum viable product, talk to potential customers, and gather real-world data.
Right.
Don't be afraid to experiment, to iterate, and to pivot.
Uh-huh.
Embrace the uncertainty,
Yeah.
and remember that the most important thing is to keep learning.
That's fantastic advice.
Thank you.
It's a reminder that anyone can embrace the lean startup mindset and start making a difference one experiment at a time.
Absolutely. The world needs more lean startups,
I agree.
both in the business world and beyond.
We'll be back with the final part of our deep dive into the lean startup, where we'll explore even more practical tools and techniques, share inspiring case studies, and offer actionable advice for applying these principles to your own endeavors. Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into the lean startup. We've covered a lot of ground, from defining a startup and understanding MVPs, to exploring the power of pivoting, building adaptive organizations, and even delving into innovation accounting and the 5 Whys technique. But now let's roll up our sleeves and get even more practical. What are some of those tangible tools and techniques that we can use to build a lean startup? One thing that really stuck with me from the book is Ries's emphasis on working in small batches. It's a concept he borrows from lean manufacturing, but it seems surprisingly relevant to the fast-paced world of startups.
It's all about breaking down large, complex tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Okay.
This allows for faster feedback loops, quicker iterations, and course correction before you've invested too much time or resources in a direction that might be wrong.
It's interesting because we often think about efficiency in terms of doing things in bulk, like batch processing emails or cooking a large meal to last for days.
Right.
But Ries argues that this approach can actually be less efficient in the long run, especially for startups.
Think about traditional product development.
Okay.
It often involves these long, drawn-out cycles
Right.
where you plan, design, build, and then finally release a big, feature-laden product.
Right.
By then, the market might have shifted, or
Yeah.
your initial assumptions might be totally outdated.
You risk building something nobody wants.
Exactly.
It's like spending months writing a book without ever getting feedback from beta readers or editors.
Yeah.
You might end up with a manuscript that needs a complete overhaul.
Exactly. Working in small batches, on the other hand, means releasing smaller incremental updates more frequently.
Okay.
Think of it like writing a blog post instead of a book.
Right.
You can publish it, get feedback, and refine it based on that feedback. It's much more agile and responsive to change.
It's about embracing that rapid iteration cycle that's so crucial in the startup world.
Exactly.
But how does this idea of small batches translate into the actual process of building a product or developing a service?
Yeah.
Can you give us a concrete example?
Imagine you're building a new feature for your mobile app.
Okay.
Instead of waiting months to release a fully polished, perfect version,
Right.
you could release a bare bones version with just the core functionality first.
So like an MVP within an MVP.
Precisely. Get that minimal version out there into the hands of real users and gather feedback.
Okay.
You might discover that users interact with it in ways you hadn't anticipated, or that certain features are way more important than others.
Okay.
This feedback then informs your next iteration.
Right.
You're constantly refining and improving based on real-world data,
Right.
not just your own assumptions.
It's like that old adage, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. It's better to get something out there and start learning than to wait for perfection, which might never come.
Ries actually uses a great analogy to illustrate this concept.
Okay.
Stuffing envelopes.
Okay.
It seems more efficient to fold all the letters first,
Right.
then seal all the envelopes, then apply all the stamps.
Right.
But surprisingly, it's actually faster to complete each envelope one at a time.
That's so counterintuitive. Why is that?
Because working in small batches reduces the risk of errors.
Okay.
Imagine if you only discovered halfway through that the letters didn't fit in the envelopes.
Right.
With the large batch approach, you'd have a ton of wasted work to undo.
Yeah.
But if you're working on each envelope individually, you catch the problem right away.
It's a great reminder that sometimes the most efficient approach is not the most obvious one.
Absolutely.
It's about finding those little hacks that can save you time and headaches in the long run. So we're working in small batches, gathering feedback and iterating quickly. But how do we make decisions about what to build next? How do we prioritize features or even decide when it's time to pivot?
That's where data-driven decision-making comes in. Ries is a big proponent of tracking actionable metrics.
Right.
Those that give you real insights into customer behavior
Right.
and the effectiveness of your product or service.
It's not just about vanity metrics like total downloads or website traffic,
No.
but about those metrics that actually tell you something meaningful about how your product is being used and whether you're meeting your goals.
Exactly. For example, if you're building a social media platform, you might track metrics like daily active users,
Okay.
user engagement, or viral coefficient.
Right.
These metrics tell you whether people are actually using and enjoying your platform,
Right.
not just downloading it and forgetting about it.
It's about focusing on the metrics that truly matter,
Absolutely.
those that are aligned with your overall business goals.
Data should be your guide,
Right.
helping you validate or invalidate your assumptions and course correct as needed.
It's about moving away from gut feelings and intuition and towards a more objective, data-driven approach.
That makes sense. But how do you actually create a culture where data is truly valued and used to drive decision-making?
It's a combination of leadership process and technology.
Okay.
Leaders need to set the tone
Okay.
by emphasizing the importance of data and making data-driven decisions themselves.
Right.
You need to have processes in place for collecting, analyzing, and sharing data
Right.
in a way that is accessible and understandable.
Okay.
And of course, technology plays a crucial role.
Right.
There are so many great tools available today that can help you track and visualize data, making it easier for everyone in your organization to understand and use it.
It's about building a data-driven culture where everyone understands the value of data and feels empowered to use it to make better decisions.
You hit the nail on the head.
I like that.
It's about creating a feedback loop where data informs decisions,
Right.
which leads to new experiments and more data driving a cycle of continuous improvement. This is all incredibly valuable. But before we wrap up our deep dive, I want to circle back to one last concept that we've touched on a few times now, the 5 whys method.
Okay.
It's a simple yet powerful technique for problem solving that Ries highlights in his book. Can you remind us how it works and why it's so effective?
Absolutely. The 5 whys is a technique borrowed from the Toyota production system.
Right.
And it's all about getting to the root cause of a problem, not just addressing the symptoms.
Right.
You simply ask why 5 times in a row,
Okay.
each time drilling down to a deeper level of understanding.
So like peeling back.
They might ask, why did this bug occur? Because the code wasn't properly tested. Why wasn't the code properly tested? Because we were rushing to meet a deadline. Why were we rushing to meet a deadline? Because we didn't properly estimate the scope of the project.
So by asking why, repeatedly, they uncover a systemic issue.
Right.
Core project planning.
Exactly.
That might be contributing to other problems beyond just this one bug.
Precisely. And addressing that root cause,
Right.
perhaps by implementing better project management practices, will have a far greater impact than simply fixing the bug.
It's about being proactive rather than reactive. It's about solving the underlying problems, not just the symptoms.
The 5 Whys is such a valuable tool because it can be applied to any problem, big or small.
Right.
It encourages a shift from a blame-oriented culture to a learning-oriented culture.
I like that.
It's about understanding why things happen, not just who's at fault.
And it's a great way to foster collaboration and shared understanding across different teams. When everyone is involved in the problem-solving process, you're more likely to come up with effective, lasting solutions.
Absolutely. The 5 Whys is just one example of the many practical tools and techniques that Ries presents in the Lean Startup. But ultimately, it's not just about the tools. It's about the mindset.
It's about embracing the principles of experimentation, validated learning, and continuous improvement. It's about building a culture that is adaptable, resilient, and customer-centric.
It's about recognizing that the journey of building a successful startup is one of constant learning, adaptation, and growth. And it's a journey that anyone can embark on armed with the right mindset and the right tools.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the Lean Startup.
My pleasure.
We've covered a lot of ground, but this is just the beginning.
Absolutely.
There's so much more to explore and learn about this powerful methodology. If you're inspired to learn more, I highly recommend checking out Eric Ries' blog, Startup Lessons Learned, as well as other great resources like Ash Maurya's Running Lean and Steve Blank's The 4 Steps to the Epiphany.
Excellent resources.
We'll be sure to include links to those resources in the show notes. And remember, the Lean Startup is more than just a methodology. It's a mindset.
It is.
It's a way of approaching challenges with curiosity, experimentation, and a commitment to continuous learning.
Absolutely.
So go out there, test your assumptions, embrace the uncertainty, and start building something amazing.
The world needs more Lean startups.
That's it for this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep innovating, and keep building a system.